Hello, everyone, and welcome. Good evening if you're joining us from Asia. Good morning and good afternoon if you're joining us from other parts of the world. My name is Deep Pal, and I'm a visiting fellow in the Asia program in Carnegie Endowment for International Peace. And we are here today for a very special launch event for the paper China's Influence in South Asia, Vulnerabilities and Resilience in Four Countries. It is part of a Carnegie Endowment project, China's Impact on Strategic Regions, in which we look at 8 pivotal countries, 4 in South Asia and 4 in Europe, and how China's expanding footprint has influenced them. More on the project in just a minute, but before that, a little bit about the panelists who are joining us today. We have a stellar panel, and let me welcome first Asanga Abhay who is an international security and geopolitics analyst and a senior fellow at Millennium Project in Washington, D.C. He's a prolific author, most recently of Conundrum of an Island, Sri Lanka's Geopolitical Challenges, which came out earlier this year. He's a regular commentator in various publications on South Asian security. He is also the founding director general of the Institute of National Security and Strategic Studies in Sri Lanka. Welcome, Asanga. Next, we have Dr. Masroor Riaz, who is an economist and the founder and chairman of Policy Exchange Bangladesh, which focuses on applied economic policy and investment. He has worked at the World Bank and at United Kingdom's Department of International Development, or DFID, and he's an expert on economic growth and creation of markets. Welcome, Masroor. We also have Dr. Pramod Jaiswal, who is presently research director at the Nepal Institute for International Cooperation and Engagement. He has held visiting and regular faculty positions at different universities in Nepal and China. His most recent book, Nepal and the Great Powers, came out in 2019, and very few people that I know keep as close an eye on Nepal's relationships with other powers as Pramod does. Thank you for joining us today, Pramod. And finally, last but not least, we have Dr. Rashida Didi, a member of the Maldives Higher Education Council. She also works as an independent academic and resource person and has been associated with the Maldives National University for many years. She is one of the preeminent voices on international relations out of Maldives. And recent years, she has been focusing on the Indian Ocean and Indo-Pacific issues, particularly relating to the Maldives. I welcome you all. Before we get started, a few house rules for those who are joining us over Zoom, YouTube, or any other social media channel. You can also watch us on any of Carnegie Endowment's many social media pages. Wherever you are, if you have a question, please mention who your question is to. Leave it in the comment box of the service you're using, and we will pick it up from there. Now, before we go ahead, a little bit about this project. China's impact on strategic regions, that is the project, it fulfills the need for a grassroots view of Chinese engagement in South Asia and in parts of Europe. Now, in the last decade, we know China has become far more attentive to its South Asian periphery. It has moved beyond mere commercial and development engagements to more far-reaching political and security ones. Now, this includes having a say in domestic political developments and emerging as an active stakeholder in people-to-people relations, and even stepping in to influence how China is portrayed in the media in these countries. Now, our project comes in here to provide an understanding of Chinese influence in South Asia that is based on local ground zero perspective, which we felt was not there as much as one would have needed to. Now, we set out to connect a network of influencers. We got their views on how they feel about China's relationship with their countries. We used interviews. We trawled the local newspapers in the local languages in all of these 4 focus countries, as well as in English. The purpose was to understand the issues from the local stakeholders who have deep knowledge that would help devise better and accurate understanding of the issues, and therefore inform the recommendations in the paper. Now, one of the key findings of the project has been that in many of these countries, China's economic and political footprint has expanded so quickly that even those countries that have relatively strong state and civil society institutions were struggling to grapple with the implications. As part of this project, we therefore identified and categorized the vulnerabilities in these focus states in South Asia. In some countries, we found that state institutions were brittle. In some cases, the civil society acted as an inadequate check against creeping external interference. Elsewhere, we found elites were prone to capture, including by external actors such as China and its proxies. Now, I will briefly get into the findings, but we will talk a great deal more about that with our panelists. But what we found is that while China's interest is strategic, its main asset are its economic levers of influence, and this depends on what these four states want or ask for. Now, China is proactive in using its tools of influence, which are becoming more and more diverse with increasing time as well as greater engagement. We also found that the countries are learning from each other and changing how they exercise their agency as a result. In terms of recommendations, we found that for a country such as the US or its partners to be engaged in South Asia, one of the key things is to be consistent. Now, that is a strategy that China has used and has used with great success. For the United States to be present in South Asia would require a solid, consistent policy with objectives that were clear to the participating countries. Let me also tell you that while we have the English copy of the paper, which is already in the Carnegie Endowment website, we are already translating this in Sinhala, Nepali, and Bangla. Now, the Sinhala paper will be available later today on the Carnegie Endowment website. You can pick it up from there. The Bangla and Nepali translations will be available on the Carnegie Endowment website by the end of this week, by Friday. And we hope that these translations allow us to reach more people in these countries and allow informed debate. With that, let me start by welcoming the panelists. And Masroor, if I can start with you, I hope you have had a chance to go through the report. And I was wondering, what is driving the Bangladesh-China relationship? And in terms of what we found in the report, are these largely the ways in which the dynamics of this relationship is working, or is there more?
Thank you, Deep. First of all, let me congratulate you, your team, and the Carnegie Endowment for completing this seminal piece of work, and very timely. And I think this is going to be extremely helpful in both geopolitics as well as geoeconomics in terms of the lights it provides in terms of the current reality, the direction, and what it means or implications for countries like Bangladesh or South Asia as a region as a whole. And thank you for having me over here. And I also congratulate you and the team as you have brought out really concrete findings, very focused direction in terms of your assessment in the report. So I think what drives the Bangladesh-China relationship, I would say three. There are many areas, but I would categorize them into three groups. Broader geopolitics, economic, and developmental. And although economic and developmental often may sound similar, but there are sort of fine line between the two as well. And often the economic and developmental is intrinsically linked to the broader geopolitical aspects. Now, as we all know, the Bangladesh-China relationship started back in 70s, and I think it evolved through the decades, whereby the two countries became quite close in terms of, particularly the Chinese investment, which gradually increased over the time into infrastructure areas, right? And this Chinese infrastructure involvement started very intensely in the 90s and then started expanding in the 2000s. And in the last decade, particularly in the last few years, it has reached a very, sort of intense state. So this whole infrastructure development, which is China's mainstay in contribution to Bangladesh's development, I think it's very well appreciated, as Bangladesh required huge infrastructure development particularly as it was taking off. The economy was taking off towards the middle income about 10-15 years ago, and the country was actually making good progress at a level where most LDCs actually found it difficult to reach that level. Bangladesh has had the highest share of manufactured goods in its exports compared to any other LDCs, less developed countries. Bangladesh's share of manufactured merchandise or merchandise in export has been almost 90%, and the average LDC has been 20-25%. Now, banking on that, Bangladesh really wanted to make it to wanted to break into the middle income status, which it finally did in 2016, 2017, and it wanted to break out of the LDC category into the developing country status, for which it finally qualified first in 2018 and the final assessment in 2021. So all of these also came on the sort of back of the very important need for Bangladesh to continually create 2 million plus jobs every year for the youths who were coming into the job market. And this was really important both for the politicians as well as for the social order and social progress. And that in turn required this huge investment or Bangladesh to upgrade itself towards the next set of infrastructure development, for which it required external finance. Of course, it did have very strong participation of the development partners such as the World Bank Group, Asian Development Bank, Japan, but it needed more. And I think where it actually made it sort of really easier for China to come into that developmental aspect is where all other development partners kind of stopped, either in terms of availability of funding or the speed of disbursement, or in terms of risk threshold, environmental, social, and other, or even procurement risk. The Chinese came in and actually pushed the envelope. And that's where I think the Bangladesh's relationship with China, through the expansion of or upgradation of the infrastructure development through the sort of infrastructure 2.0, I think it took Bangladesh-China relationship to a next level. The second was the economic part. As you know, the Bangladesh it made huge achievements in terms of economic prosperity, 6% plus growth rate consistent over a decade, increase in income, increase in wages. For 2 consecutive years, IMF has put Bangladesh ahead of India in terms of GDP per capita. And a cornerstone of that was actually export-led manufacturing, ready-made garments, but then ready-made garments, and also had a few other members in its export club, leather and footwear, frozen foods, and several other sectors. But on the banking on this export-oriented sector, huge domestic market also expanded, which also got fueled by increasing number of remittances or volume of remittances from countries where Bangladeshi migrant workers have been sending money, but also the growth of agri supply chain and its impact on rural economy. But Bangladesh, being a resource-constrained country, it hugely depended on the smooth supply chain, a competitive supply chain, and access to inputs in the right time at the right price in order for Bangladesh to be competitive in the global market, to become the second largest exporter of ready-made garments, and thereby claiming a very strong position in the exporters club. And China steadily remained as the largest supplier of inputs into the industrial sector, both for export and domestic market, as well as in the agri sector in the country. So that is an example of how the economic drivers deepen the relationship. So if you're talking to the private sector, I think whether it's in terms of machineries or inputs or raw materials, or often in terms of human resources these days, technical resources, I think China comes up very frequently. And then of course the overall geopolitical drivers, particularly starting from 2017 when the Rohingya crisis happened in Myanmar, I think that basically brought Bangladesh and China even closer, because Bangladesh had to accept, and it was a reality that China has a strong lever on Myanmar and its military junta, or Myanmar as a country. And Bangladesh really needed a lot of assurance, and it really needed to find out ways how to, in terms of how to address this sort of unfolding Rohingya crisis. And that's where I think the Chinese offer, or the extension of help, is something Bangladesh embraced as something very warm, and that kind of underpins the third pillar of Bangladesh-China relationship, the geopolitical. Over to you, Deep.
Right, right. Thanks, Masroor. I'll come back to you. But Asanga, if you can come to you, one of the things that are at the center possibly of what Masroor is saying is essentially China has looked at Bangladesh and figured out what Bangladesh needs, right, or what Bangladesh is asking for, and customized its approach. Is that something that you would say you've seen in Sri Lanka's case as well?
Thanks. Thank you, Deep. I think let me congratulate Carnegie and the team for doing this and very important and valuable report. It's an eye-opener, actually. Some of the recommendations when I read, not only for Sri Lankan, the policy circle, but also even for the DC, Washington DC policy circle. For the last few months I've been here, I mean, the rhetoric that I hear is China invasion. The more sort of the public discourse of a China invasion. So the report actually brings different contours into the Chinese influence in countries like Sri Lanka, and how we could reverse China's belligerent behavior with the challenging as well as what it requires, the diplomatic, the finesse, the commercial innovation, and also the institutional creativity in many South Asian countries is required right now. The recent fertilizer incident, the imports of fertilizer from China, is a very clear example in this. So the report actually captures these areas. So I haven't seen many reports in this direction, only focus on the infrastructure or the debt trap, but it goes beyond that, and rightly identifying a high risk of influencing political parties, journalists, various other stakeholders in the country. The impact to the democratic quintessence, which has been followed by countries like Sri Lanka. It's true that Sri Lanka has been quoted on the debt trap, multiple times in the international articles and many other, but it has not seen how we could reverse certain trends in Sri Lanka. How do we sort of introduce standards into the infrastructure? If the infrastructure projects are transformative, then it's fine. I mean, there is no problem. What sort of requirement? What does the technical expertise? Does the policy bureaucrats need? What do they need? I mean, U.S. does speak about strengthening alliances. It spoke in its hub and spoke, so multiple alliances. I mean, with the AUKUS and the Quad and all that is going on. Of course, it's important to focus on what sort of technical assistance required. And on the supply chains, like my previous speaker rightly mentioned, I mean, Sri Lanka, as a developing nation, we need China's assistance. We need China's supply chains. You cannot disrupt these things. So you have to continue. But how do we engage with China, cooperate with China, rather than getting into conflicts? So the report gives that space to look at. And so that's a huge, I would say, I congratulate on that particular area that you have really focused on. So I think the heavy militarization, discussed by the UNHRC, as well as China's support on the human rights. So those are areas also to look at, because the democratic fabric or China's influence to the internal politics are serious concerns that the policymakers Sri Lanka needs to clearly look at. So when it comes to projects such as the port city, which has been widely discussed, so these things, I mean, are done in a 30-day approval process, and so it would have taken a bit longer. I would have taken more perspectives in. So I think it's really, really important to look at China and its behavior. I mean, Sri Lanka has been a clear point of where Chinese submarines have visited. Chinese influence have been seen a serious threat to India. It's South Asia's larger power. So it's really, really important that to see China in different contours. How do we sort of strengthen the relationship with diplomatic, like I mentioned, the finesse that is required, the balanced foreign policy that is important for Sri Lanka to take forward, rather than choosing a bandwagoning policy just because of the loans that we have received, just because of the vaccine diplomacy. Importance of the balance is it impacts the regional security stability also. Small nations littorals in the Indian Ocean, I would say, are really, really important in this Indo-Pacific, the grand strategy which is been executed right now. So while Sri Lanka, nations like Sri Lanka are sort of sandwiched between the BRI and the Indo-Pacific, we need to look at bringing in standards, bringing in techniques, innovative techniques to our commercial, dealings with China, and transparency. That's really, really important.
Right. Thanks for that, Asanga. Pramod, if I can come to you, the question of Nepal is a slightly different one, as we also mention in the report. One of the aspects of it is the changing strategic importance of Nepal, as well as the role of geography, right? And I'm curious, in what ways do you see that having influenced the Nepal-China relationship in recent years?
Thank you, Deep. First of all, I'd like to congratulate Carnegie Endowment for International Peace for wonderful report. I really learned a lot. Little before coming to that, let me briefly highlight how Nepal and China engage. If you go through Nepal and China relations, what you can observe is that Nepal and Nepalese political parties are often has been blamed of being closer to China. But to be very frank, Nepal has always established closer ties with India, not China. But only when the ruling regime were not supported by India, it has moved towards China. For example, if you go to King Mahendra, at the time in 1962, there was a democratic forces in Nepal, and India was supporting that. And that was the time where King Mahendra went to China and asked for support. It was same during King Birendra time. Again, there was a new introduction of democracy, and democratic forces were supported by India. Then came King Gyanendra. At that time also, India did not support the monarch. When you come to Maoist party or the Olin, they only went to China where they're not supported by India. So though many times Nepal has been accused of being very close to China, the ruling regime has only moved to China when they're not supported by India. So they have, so that is, we have to be very clear that China has also realized that the ruling regime come to them only when they do not enjoy good relations with India or when they have difficult times. That is why China has not shown much excitement or enthusiasm when these parties went to China, for example, 1962 or others. But coming to that, it's not that China did not exploit that opportunities. Even when in China was not very enthusiastic, China used that opportunity. If you look at the history, there are three major periods where China had a strong engagement in Nepal, and that has shaped the overall relations. First was 1962. In 1962, immediately after the Indo-China War, China ended the Himalayan barrier by constructing Kodari Pass with Nepal. And we can take it in economic terms that in 1962, the economic engagement with Nepal started. Coming to 2005, when there was King Gyanendra period and the Maoist came after a while, I think that was the time where China started engaging with Nepal on a strategic front. There are lots of high-level visit by the different officials from defense sector, defense ministers. So since then, the flow of assistance in security sector started. That I call it a second term. And third is the recent one, KP Oli's tenure, where there is party-to-party relations that started. So first was economic, second is strategic, and third is party-to-party relations. So these are the major development in the relations between two countries which has shaped the relations. If you look at China's engagement around the world, China engages at four levels. First, China starts its engagement with trade. And when trade flourishes, it goes to investment. When they are secure, when they believe that the investment can be secure. After China invests in that country, they go for defense cooperation. And when they see that things, and if you look around the world, there are few countries with which China has been able to establish that defense cooperation. And at the end, they go for political advice. And in Nepal, China have reached that final lap, which is the fourth stage. There are a few things that I want to highlight on the report. Like, I really enjoy the report. It is very comprehensive and it has touched on all the major aspects. At the same time, the author has looked at China in a holistic manner, which I really appreciate. There are a few things that I really want to highlight. Three things basically. In the report, that author has pointed that Chinese tools of influence are China's personal relation with key regime actors, form of incentives or threat. China uses deter or compel both state and non-state actors. Sometimes China uses coercive threat, self-censor, many others. I think it is presented in a manner as if it's only China who has that capacity, or only China uses those means. I'm a student of diplomacy, and I teach to our students that that in diplomacy, there are different tools to promote national interest: diplomacy, propaganda, alliance, economic aid, loans, as well as coercive measures. So basically, what I want to say is that it is not only China who uses that tool, or only China has the privilege or capacity. Every power does that. So China is not standing alone, or it's not China is doing amazing thing, or it's not that China only has that capacity and other power do not. Second is that the author has raised that connectivity and infrastructure projects are the top of the wish list of all Southern states and has become a key area of cooperation with China, which I fully agree, that every country in South Asia engages with China not for building party-to-party relations or importing democracy. Everyone wants connectivity, development, infrastructure projects. All the countries want that. There is only one factor that pulls all the countries towards China is the economy. And it's not only the small neighbors. It's even the United States, Japan, or Korea, or Australia. All the countries which do not enjoy relation with China are the ones who are having biggest economic engagement. So it's not only small neighbors like Sri Lanka and Nepal who get attracted towards China for connectivity or infrastructure. Even big powers like US, European Union, Japan, Korea, or Australia get attracted towards China for economic gains. So that is the reason that countries which do not have capacity, especially the small countries who don't have strong institutions, democratization is not so strong, they get vulnerable, that is true, but they both great power or small countries get attracted to China for the same reason. Second thing, like on the Belt and Road, I think I agree with the author where he mentioned about that the countries are coming with Build Back Better World initiatives. And I think the future of BRI also depend on much. How better Build Back Better World is going to build the world. So that is the future of BRI is going to determine. If America or the other powers are coming to come and build a beautiful, better world together, I think BRI will not be effective, will not be more efficient. But if they fail to, that is where Chinese can or BRI can benefit from. Lastly, like the author has also emphasized that communicating a positive agenda, not just a negative one, will bring win-win greater favor among government, business, public. And I think it's true. Because when the countries ask small powers to choose between A or B, or China or the rest, it shows a kind of lack of confidence among those powers. If India or US or any power come and ask Nepal, Sri Lanka, small neighbors, either choose India or America, China or US, I think this do not give a very good picture about them. It shows that, oh, the power is declining, or it shows China fear, which shows that US is not confident. And I think that is not the real situation. The situation is not that the country really have to worry about China if they are able to have a new policy, reform policy, but they present in such a way that it really scares small neighbors, and then they are more in trouble. It's even the US who is not so confident. How can we take sides? So I think US and all has to be confident because they have so many allies. China has very few allies: Pakistan, Iran, North Korea, Russia. But US has around the world. I think they can come together. So they should not come with the options that, oh, they choose between one or other. None of the small powers want to be in that situation where they have to choose between US or China, or any of the power and China. Similarly, military ties and security engagement in Nepal. There's one factor that I could not explain, understand. Maybe one of can explain that. It says that military ties and security in exchanges with Nepal has been among China's weakest in the region. What does it mean? I am not sure. Now let me come briefly. There is one thing that it has also said that Nepal is under high risk. I think maybe it was true till July, but now we have new government which is led by Sir Bahadur Deuba, which is from the Nepali Congress. So I think maybe we are moving towards medium. So I think we'll not remain on high risk, we're moving towards medium in days to come. Second is that the other reason that supports is that Nepal has a strong civil society. So though we can have party-to-party relations, though the influence of China can increase, still the civil society and vibrant media will not allow the Nepalese democracy to fall apart. And the reason is that we have seen that China have tried several times to keep Nepal Communist Party united, but they failed in spite of several attempts. It does not mean that China will get discouraged and go back. It will continue, but it shows how strong Nepal is when it comes to democratization process. Few takeaway, I think, I think what we can do is that what we have realized.
Pramod, why don't I come back to you, because there are a lot of questions that are coming in, and I want to be able to take them as well. And there are questions that are being directed to Asanga and to you as well. But before I come to those, I want to quickly come to Rashida and kind of try and understand the Maldives-China relationship, in the sense that, how structural is Chinese presence in Maldives, because of the 4 countries, it is among the newest ones. And we have seen a change between the Maldives-China relationship with the Yamin regime, and then in the Soli regime. So your thoughts on how structurally sound is the relationship?
The relationship is very clearly politically oriented. Now, during the previous administration of President Yamin Abdul Qayyum, that's when China really became involved in the Maldives to the extent that it was involved in the recent years. So it had many diversities, as you mentioned in the report, diversed from many different types of projects. For example, they started with culturally oriented projects like building the museum, establishing a small library or archives within the National Library, and then, of course, infrastructure, government infrastructure, building of the foreign ministry, former foreign ministry. And even now they got renovated, newly built again with China's help. And then it was later in the 2013 when I think it was in 2013, between 2013 and 18, during Yamin's government, that it started on a mass scale, the housing projects, the infrastructure of housing projects. So that was the establishment. So I would say it's really politically oriented. And during the present government, we don't see China being involved that much, because the present government is very much pro-India. So unfortunately, with the Maldives, one has to speak about India if one is speaking about China. So that's the difference. It's between the 2 major powers that Maldivian government gets involved in. Then I think also an attraction is that the Chinese have a more lenient way of helping financially. For example, it does not require heavy close monitoring of the projects by the donor countries or donor institutions. For example, the famous or the world the most powerful financial institutions like the IMF and World Bank require strict monitoring rules. They have regulations. And India has also very strict, for example, employing their workers as people on the site and engineers and so on. So I think the Chinese attraction is for government, especially if the government is more prone to be more corrupt. It is very attractive. There's not that much of monitoring of where the finances are going so much. There's not that much of monitoring of how the project is progressing. So that's another attraction. And that's why I would say that the Maldives relationship with China is more financial, more finance-oriented than politically oriented. As you mentioned in the reports, that it does have connections with the politics, for example, gaining popularity. Now, the biggest project that Maldivians talk about is the Sino-Maldivian Friendship Bridge between the capital Male and the airport island. Now, that one was done during Yamin's government, which was becoming very unpopular with the common people. But that almost, I would say, lifted the government from that unpopularity, almost falling apart situation, because it became a symbol of helping the people, serving the people, connecting the capital to the airport. So people can go to the airport, especially if people are sick and taken, which are often done because the Maldives does not have it does have hospitals, but it's not providing for everybody, every patient's needs. So in that case, transportation is very, very important between the capital and the airport. So that saved that particular government administration. So coming back to your question again, another attraction I would say would be the tourist attraction. Now that's a major industry, as you know, excuse me, in the Maldives. China became the largest tourist group for about 5 years. It surpassed the European tourists. So during that time, until 2019, from about 5 years before that, that was a major strength for the relationship. For the Chinese, they found a little island nation where they can hop in and enjoy the beach. And for the Maldivians, they found a new market. Although, to be honest, Maldivians prefer the European tourists because they spend more, obviously. I mean, they spend more on their entertainment and all kinds of and food and so on. So back to you, if that answers your question.
It kind of does, but if I can push you a little bit on that, Rashida, I mean, elections in Maldives will come up in a couple of years, in 2023 and then 2024, right? From what you are saying, if there is a change in the government, how does that affect the China-Maldives relationship? And Asanga, I will come to you next with a similar question, considering the role, as we have read in the report as well, between the elites in the country and China are crucial. So, Rashida, first to you with that question.
Yeah, thank you. Sorry, I didn't congratulate you on your work, which I really appreciated. I went through the report, and it's very, very useful for all of us, all the countries. Yes, how does that work? How that works is that if during 2023 we will have the election, depending on the winner. and its politics, which could be either, the current government or current coalition partners or parts of those partners, which would stand with India. But if it is the former government, Yamin's government, or people associated with that particular coalition, it could be China. But right now, China's relationship with the Maldives is still very cordial. It's very good. Recently, just today, I heard that China offered scholarships, and one of the scholarships is for a swimmer, local swimmer who is a national champion, and also in the region she's well known. So she got a scholarship. China offered scholarship to study in China, and it could be anything that she wants to study. But these are new things happening. And the point is that China has not abandoned the Maldives. Neither the Maldives have abandoned China, because it's very quickly that Maldives might have to turn to China, depending on, again, those strict rules that apply for financial loans, etc. Anytime the government could have to turn to China. So they have not offended China, and neither is China offended with or is threatening, as I think parts of your report mentions. In some countries it could be a threat. No, China has not threatened the Maldives in any way, despite the fact that with the change of government, it treated them very distantly and with a very hostile attitude. Thank you.
Asanga, same question to you. In the report we talk about the close relationship between the Rajapaksa regime and China, and we had seen this reverse a little bit under the earlier Sirisena Wickremesinghe government, right? What happens if in the next elections the Rajapaksas lose and others come back?
Well, in the Sri Lankan story, with my experience, being in the government for 15 years, serving the Rajapaksa's earlier regime 1.0, as well as the Sirisena regime, the danger, which you also have captured the elites, the China's involvement, influencing, which you aptly call it high risk. I would also put it as a serious risk, looking at the the dimensions coming from the bureaucracy as well as the administration on China's influence coming into Sri Lankan, the elites, such as the Gotabaya Rajapaksa regime, which has opened a very sort of a different model to the Mahinda's administration. His model is appointing 26 military officers, getting military into the democratic space or the political space. There's a huge danger for countries like Sri Lanka. The volatility of Sri Lanka is clearly understood because of the civil war it had, 2 youth insurrections, constitutional coups, various other stuff. So a country that is open doors for military to come in, take in government administration positions, which China has no problem with that. So here's the danger, which you have highlighted and which I don't want China to get involved at all. China is a good partner in terms of economic. We assisted Sri Lanka many times. Let it be there. So not come into the democratic space, talking about getting Sri Lanka to speak about Xinjiang is not a good way to go forward. Sri Lanka has never spoken about Chinese human rights in Xinjiang. I think our researchers have rightly captured that Sri Lanka should not become or take the path of Myanmar or get into bringing the military as the final resort. Mahinda Rajapaksa during his regime did not get the military into administrative positions or administration. Now this is a clear basically the difference between the two brothers, although the two brothers are ruling the country together. Mahinda is a person who has a much wider political dimension coming from his experience of 40 years, who can actually, bring back some sort of balance into the regime right now. So I don't see that, because we had multiple elections, so things need to, consistent policies need to continue, such as the recommendations of the report. We need consistent policies to move forward. A country like Sri Lanka, as we are struggling with the economic crisis right now, with the COVID, as well as multiple issues and challenges. So important that we see the Chinese perspective also. For example, saying, let's talk about when you talk about the adventurism or the aggressiveness of China, the Chinese officers used to say, like, shall we talk about the US adventurism? They are very blunt in their statements. So even on the submarine visit, they used to tell me, don't worry about it, they're not even nuclear. This was quote unquote, from the Chinese. So the perspective from China is also really important to capture. While China should not get involved in the internal politics of Sri Lanka, and also Sri Lankan policymakers should make sure there should be proper standards, like Pramod rightly mentioned, Biden's B3W. If he can implement these things on bringing standards, Sri Lanka has always been a partner on the international, adhering to the international norms and laws of the law of the sea, or be the Indian Ocean Zone for peace. Tremendous, you can see from the past its contribution. So you should move forward in that direction. When you see support coming into a semi-autocratic or pushing a quasi-democracy to a semi-autocracy, so this is the danger. Your report captures that, the agency, the Chinese coming into. So because you cannot, for example, approve such a massive project like Port City in 30 days. So there you go. So that clearly shows the China involvement in these areas. Dr. Jayashankar, when he was in Colombo, was he was straightforward. He did ask on the East Container Terminal of the Chinese hand. Is there? Of course. When does the port workers speak about geopolitics? Port authority. The trade unions does not speak geopolitics. So you have to understand the dimensions, the complexity. But China should is a old civilization. We have interacted with China. From the past. It's important that we have strengthened our relationship with China also. But China should not get into internal politics and coming into alter a model or come up with a Chinese model of development. But let Sri Lanka choose its own model of development.
Okay, Asanga, you talked about the question of Xinjiang, right? And we have a question from Susan Finder of Peking University, and it's to all panelists. If the panelists could comment on the role of law in their relationship with China, who would like to go first? Pramod, would you want to start?
Let me add a couple of points and then come to rule of law. Actually, there's a few questions as well which has been raised. I think the purpose of China is, and other countries around the world is same, that China wants to serve its national interest. It is true that they use illegitimate ways or illegitimate means. It is true that China benefits from weak institutions, weak state institutions. China don't believe in rule of law. We all know that. China want to get benefit of fragile civil societies. Similarly, countries where elite captures the future of political life. These are the features that China benefit from that. China is not interested in rule of law. We all know that, because China is just interested to get its interest fulfilled. But the problem is that in spite of countries coming around in the region and spending such a huge amount of resources, Where do they come from? What the countries in South Asia are asking is that the other countries should enable this country to have strong institutions, a strong institution that can ensure rule of law. The civil society should be strengthened. That is what the countries are asking for. That is what Nepal says, that if America or the other countries can benefit from China economically, why can't Nepal benefit? Then the question is, yes, because America has strong institutions, they have rule of law, they have a strong civil society, and that is what Nepal asked for. Why not United States help us in building those institutions, help us in democratization that will deter China to use those illegitimate means. That is what we want. We want Chinese assistance on economic support. At the same time, we want Western support to strengthen our democratic process so that we can benefit from both. That is what we are looking for. Second is that many countries see BRI as strategic, but small countries, I don't know, intentionally or unintentionally, they see it as economic. For Nepal, BRI is purely economic. For Sri Lanka, BRI is purely economic. Similarly, China sees Indo-Pacific strategy as purely strategic, but Nepal sees Indo-Pacific as economic. Sri Lanka see Indo-Pacific as economic, because I don't know, intentional or unintentional. So this is what we want to say, that these countries, they benefit from that. That's why they want to pretend. So at the same time, the small countries, we believe that we don't have that capacity to get caught into this big power game. We can't sustain. I mean, where do Nepal stand between China and US geopolitical war? Where do Sri Lanka stand? Where do Maldives stand? So we want to escape out of that process. Even if it is strategic, we believe that it is not a strategic, and we want to engage because we need economic assistance. So this is where the West can come. If you want to keep China out, you have to first serve the first interest, that is economic. If America do not come with build back better world, and then you ask, oh, don't go for BRI, it's death trap, it's less convincing to the people, because we as experts understand that. For common people, Hambantota is a port. For common people in Nepal, BRI is railway coming from China. So it's a development project. So I think that is where the institutions of the West has to come. Maybe they can come together and come with comprehensive South Asia plan, where India, US, Japan, European Union can come together and address the first interest, which is economic, and then the other thing should be addressed.
Yeah, no, Pramod, that's a really interesting point when you say, that for a small country, something like a BRI is you look at it from the economic point of view and not at the strategic point of view. And this is my question to all of you, which came to mind when you said this, is that, be that as it may, it is not possible for any of these countries, for a Nepal, for a Bangladesh, for a Sri Lanka, for a Maldives, to escape the strategic ramifications of a BRI, right? I mean, you may look at it as economic, and that makes perfect sense, right? But then what do you do about the strategic ramifications? How do you manage that? Rashida, do you want to come in on that?
I don't think the Maldives thinks too seriously about the BRI, because I don't think Maldives is that involved with China on that project. Of course, we have signed an MOU with China, which involves working with a BRI as well. But since it hasn't outlined, China hasn't outlined what's involved with the BRI project in connection with the Maldives. Maldivian government has not thought, as far as I can see, has not thought about it very seriously. But I'm sure they are aware that it's strategic as well. It's not just financial. But to what extent, I'm not sure. I don't see any signs that it's seriously thought of. Yeah.
Masroor, I will come to you with a very interesting question. But before that, Pramod, if I can come back to you, because you started this point, and I'm really curious. How does a country like Nepal deal with the strategic fallout of a project that they claim is economic, but does have strategic dimensions?
Like Nepal signed MOU on BRI. It's almost 3 years, but there is no progress. all the speakers, everyone in Nepal say BRI is good for the country. There is no progress on any report. None of the political parties say that BRI is not a wonderful project. Everyone says it's a wonderful project. Everyone said we should engage with China, but there is no progress. That is the implication. That because of that, the small countries are caught in that, and they are not able to overcome that. Because of strategy implications, every country might have signed BRI project with China, but there is not progress, or it's halted, or so. Because of that geopolitical competition, the countries, small countries, are affected. Though they have signed it, they're not able to benefit the way they wanted so far.
Okay. Okay. Masroor, there's a question which says that China is an opaque society in every way, government, media, scholarship, etc. How do these countries assess ground realities and motives vis-a-vis their own country's interests? And I'm coming to you about this because in Bangladesh we have seen multiple instances where projects have started and then the Bangladeshi government has come in and said, there have been allegations of bribery in some cases. There have been allegations that rules of procedure have not been followed. Very recently, we have seen cost escalation accusations and projects being pushed down or put on the back burner. How does a country operate with um, a system that is opaque and be sure that its end of the deal, its end of the bargain, will be kept up?
Yeah, very good question, Deep, and something which is becoming increasingly common or pertinent. And I think this has links to one of your earlier questions as well, ramifications of the Belt Road or engagement in the Belt Road, right? I mean, if I start with the ramification, if I to take the liberty to touch upon that one, because it has links to the answer to your latest question. The ramifications of joining BRI, taking advantage of BRI, could be from different perspective. I think obviously a lot of it is strategic, security, geopolitical, but I think a lot is actually on governance, and particularly project governance or project-led governance. Within in terms of how development projects take place, how public expenditure take place, how annual development programs of the government take place. And that's where I think reliance on China, I think, certainly is laying bare this particular problem, very, very intensely, where I think cost escalation, for example, is becoming an regular phenomena. Changes in or sort of having to change scope or expand the scope or budget is actually becoming more common phenomena. But despite that, I do see, I work very closely with the government of Bangladesh, the private sector, and some of the foreign investors and foreign governments trying to pursue economic interest in Bangladesh. And I do work none other than the American companies or their platforms in Bangladesh. They're my clients, the American Chamber. And one area they're trying to sort of, compete, intensely with the Chinese is the infrastructure projects, but without really a plan. And some of your recommendations and findings did have that, where the economic levers that China use have not been used as strongly by, let's say, either the Americans or the Japanese or perhaps Indians as well. The debt trap is actually not yet a debt trap for many of the countries and so on. And then how China responds on a need base. So this need based response of China and the very timely availability as well as availability in terms of the right size is still putting China in a more advantageous position with respect to countries like Bangladesh when it comes to projects, development projects, public projects, or public sector projects being awarded to Chinese companies, and overshadowing the disadvantage till today that arises from these cost escalation and project governance related issues, right? So I think it's really, I think it's almost like that, the countries are ready to pay a little extra, even if they're not, if it doesn't come as part of a plan, as long as they actually get what they need in time and in right size and without much conditionalities. And I think that's where China is ahead compared to others. That's number one. Number two, this opaqueness of China or the Chinese way of doing business, it is getting exacerbated by the weaknesses in the host country's own governance system. So irrespective of which country the bidders or the project implementers come from, there is an inherent weakness, governance weakness in the procurement system, public procurement system, project management system of public project management system in the countries like Bangladesh. So unless those inherent capacity, the problems are addressed, which are sort of general, it's not specific to any country, and it's built into the system. I think this opaqueness in Chinese system is just going to add a little extra, because it would happen anyway, in most of the projects. And I think any opaque system that comes in from a foreign source can take greater advantage of that. So I think your report does have a recommendation where it advocates for building capacity and local institutions, right? And this is one area where I think local capacity and institution building or institution strengthening is critical. But that said, I think your findings also have a very good point where that China is yet to understand the local institution and organization cultures better. They do, I think, understand the political institutions and the culture very well. They are starting to understand the procurement related culture, practices, political economy of the government institution, but they still, of course, do not understand the institution in general or broader institution as good as some of the other countries.
Right, great. We are absolutely out of time, but before I go, I would, with your permission, ask a question and hope for some inputs from all of you, which is largely on the angle when we were speaking to stakeholders in these various countries. Something that did come up is that despite there not being formal mechanisms of exchanging information and understanding and knowledge about dealings with China between each other, that is something that was happening at an informal level. I was wondering if you would like to come in and talk about the lessons for your respective countries that you see having been picked up from how other countries in the region have dealt with China. Asanga, I'll start with you.
Definitely. I mean, MCC is a place where I can start, the US MCC grant, where I have spoken with Pramod a few weeks ago, the importance of going ahead with the MCC in countries like Nepal. What happened to Sri Lankan case was a commission was put up, and then we lost that grant, and a heavy politicization, seeing it as a national security threat. Now, this is the area that a country should not push towards. There's a danger of doing that, and I mean, China. Basically, it's seeing its assertiveness in the region, as well as its the strategic trap, which I have been discussing about, of the long-term implications of the projects. One has to be, the countries have to be extremely careful on this particular area. What Mazur spoke about was very important on the transparency, as well as bringing in understanding the opaqueness. But if the projects are transformative, then it's fine. But the problem with Sri Lanka is that 99 years long-term leases, even the next administration will not be able to undo certain things that this administration has done, or the administration after that. Because when I did ask from the Chinese side on the projects which were signed for 99 years, can be revisited, it was a clear answer. You cannot revisit because it has been signed. So these are the dangers, I think, that countries should understand. What we can share among our countries is like what we have gone through, and the Sri Lankan, the debt trap which you have captured, not limiting to the quantitative data that Chinese have less amount of money, Chinese have less ships arriving to Sri Lanka than the Japanese or than the others. No, those are not. The quantitative data is one side, but you have to see the strategic dimension I think we can share these among countries and, build our standards when it comes to bringing in the BRI. For example, projects such as Matal, which has no flights coming in. There's an airport built in Sri Lanka. Then the business models are not working. So we need collaborative approaches and also advice to the policymakers how best we can get it, because the money has already been put. It's been built. So how do we get it right, Deep? Now that's the most important thing, because what do we do with this airport? How do we bring the flights in? So I think the collaborative approach is really, really important, rather than going into the projects that does not deliver any return. Sri Lanka cannot afford to get into projects like this, and China should also understand. I'm very happy that China is looking at a consultative point of view, looking at bringing BRI. How do we improve the BRI? And one of the consultations I did recently with China was on how do we improve the standards of BRI? How do we get it? I mean, China is listening now, as well as trying to improve their model also. So, which is really good. And so you have, rather than confronting or, so you're getting to a cooperation. So, I mean, your report speaks about many recommendations on that area.
Masroor, what is Bangladesh learning from others in the region?
I think there's several. I think, but the most important is, how do you really balance between great partners, some of whom actually are unfortunately on the different sides of a table or different sides of a camp. And I think the Sri Lanka, Sanja mentioned a few good examples. I think the turn of events in Sri Lanka or the developments, I think it's being closely followed in Bangladesh, both in the government, political quarter, or among the informed part of the public, is that because in India, China is extremely important infrastructure development partner, supply chain partner. India and Bangladesh has very deep-rooted relationship right through the War of Liberation, and it's the neighbor who has very multifaceted relationship with Bangladesh, and of course Bangladesh does have a very congenial relationship with the U.S. So how do you really balance it? And the latest example, I was in a meeting with the health minister today, and I think the issue of vaccine diplomacy came up, or the vaccine complexities came up, whereby Bangladesh was offered Chinese vaccines back in October last year, and for different reasons Bangladesh had to balance and could not go for the Chinese vaccine, which set back, according to the policymakers, which set back Bangladesh's overall vaccination program by 4 to 5 months. And of course, what Bangladesh now has is overwhelmingly 90% since last April or May is really Chinese vaccines. So, I mean, but Bangladesh had to make a balance, but in the process, it lost out a few months on an important initiative as COVID vaccination. So Bangladesh will have to, continually monitor this and play this balancing act even more carefully. But when it comes to the interest of the nation and the country's health, I think Bangladesh probably will need to make more assertive decisions. And I think that I would say is the biggest learning that Bangladesh is going through at the moment.
Okay. Rashida and then Pramod.
Yes, thank you. Basically, two things the Maldives learned from the region. One is the case of Hambantota in Sri Lanka. Everyone knows about that project, and it's not to get into, not to be involved in a project like that, and then not to be involved with the death trap. And the other one is Pakistan, Economic Corridor, Pakistan, although they're not represented here, and Djibouti over in Africa. Not to get not to lease the islands. In the case of Maldives, it will be islands, to China so that they could be turned into military ports or military bases.
Okay.
Thank you.
Finally, Pramod, quick, short answer. We are way over time.
Sure. I mean, like Rashida said, like from Hamban Tota, obviously, like Nepal do not want to take huge projects, and because we don't want to big loan from China, only grants are welcome. Similarly, we are very careful about environmental concerns, being a Himalayan country. At the same time, we do not allow any of the project that can hurt either of the neighbors. We don't want Chinese project that can hurt India or the neighbors. We are very careful with neighbor sensitivity. Let me briefly point out the one question that is raised about MCC, and I'll end there. On MCC, like Nepal had welcomed that. Only when the American official David Rand, he said that MCC is part of Indo-Pacific, it got into controversy. And there are media reports that China was not very happy with, because China don't like obviously Indo-Pacific strategy, and it was not happy with Nepal getting MCC. So there are reports, but recently, a few weeks ago, the government of Nepal, the Prime Minister said that they will be passing MCC, which is a good news. I think Chinese are also not very uncomfortable with MCC. The reason is that they know that if they are able to stop MCC, almost all the major Chinese projects will also be stopped. So they do not want to have that competition here, that, okay, we will stop the American project and then American will stop our project. So I think they are comfortable with American and Nepalese projects here in Nepal. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much, Asanga, Masroor, Rashida, and Pramod for joining us. And thank you to everyone who's been patiently sitting with us, listening to us talk. Do take a look at the report at the Carnegie Endowment website. The Sinhala report, I'm told, is also available right now. So Asanga, you and everyone who wants to take a look at that, please do. The Nepali and Bangla reports are going to be available on Friday. Do take a look at the reports in English or in any of the regional languages. Thank you so much for being with us this evening. Have a great rest of your day.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank